Hey y'all, thank you for joining me for another episode of Faith Chats. I know that it has been a while, but I'm going to be doing a little bit of solo chatting today because I just had some stuff that's been going on and I felt inspired to just jump on and talk about it. So, this is episode 14, and today I'm going to be doing a little solo chatting about aggravated faith. Now, in case you're a little bit confused and you're like, what is aggravated faith? Let me explain what I mean. So, it's when you have faith, right? You know that God is going to work it out. You know that God is faithful. However, you're a little aggravated, right? Like for me, I'm a little aggravated because I just went through, something not too long ago. And since I passed that test, I thought I was going to be on easy street for a while. And now there is another similar situation like it that has just occurred. And it's like, Lord, I'm standing on the character of who you are. I'm standing on, your faithfulness. I have all the receipts. I have your track record, God. I have experiences with you. And so I know that you are going to work it out for me. But if I can just be honest, like I'm a little bit aggravated right now. Listen, have you ever made it through a situation, breathe a sigh of relief, rejoice at overcoming in that area, and then not too long after have something else happen? It's like you weren't even able to catch your breath. You weren't even able to fully recover from the last thing. And now here it is, like a new thing happening. Like there is a certain frustration that comes along with that. It's like I just got through fighting. I'm not really in the mood to fight again. Can you let me recover? Can you let me rest? Can you let me enjoy my last victory before I had to defend my title again? I mean, I think about like a boxer, right? Even like the greatest boxer, needs just like that downtime, right? Just needs like that recovery period, after they have been fighting, right? Like there's just a lot of like mental distress that they have gone through is a lot of like tiredness in their body, so imagine like they went through like this crazy fight, and instead of the next fight being like 6 months later, somebody says, 3 days champ, be ready. You about to have to go through this all over again. And I know that there are some people who will say, well, God fights our battles. Yes, he absolutely does. But let's be honest. Like there are things that we also have to do in the spiritual as well as the natural, right? That takes energy, right? Like we gotta be praying, we gotta be fasting, right? We gotta be believing God and speaking his word over situations, like even when it looks bad, even when we don't understand, right? We gotta be able to stand in the face of that, right? And and then, there are things that we have to do in the natural as far as like we're driving back and forth to appointments, we're making phone calls, right? We're trying to do research, right? We're trying to like fill out applications and, like doing all of this stuff. And so, yes, God fights our battles for sure, he does. And he wins them. But there is also things that we have to do as well that can drain us, right? That can tire us out, where we feel like, Lord, I need a little bit of a recovery period, right? Like driving back and forth to all those appointments, like being on all those phone calls, right? Trying to gather all this information, like doing research, like whatever it is, whatever your situation, may have been, right? It's like, Lord, I really wasn't expecting to go through something else like this again so soon. Like I had faith, but I'm a little bit aggravated. So let me just share a little bit about what's been going on in my life recently that inspired me to want to do this big chat today. So uh, about 9 months ago, when Hurricane Ida hit, it flooded my basement, y'all. Like it destroyed my washer, my dryer, my heater. I didn't have like any heat. I had to buy like little heaters to hold me over. A water heater. Um, I had like a bunch of like, personal items that were like in boxes and stuff that got destroyed. it was just like such a mess. And I was like going back and forth with my homeowners and with FEMA. And then even like dealing with FEMA, like that just dragged on like for months. It's like they kept closing my case because they were saying like, oh, I wasn't answering their calls. And I'm like, I've been answering every strange number on this phone to make sure that I didn't miss no phone calls, okay? Um, and so it was just like a tedious process, you know. And then when they did give me something, it was just like a little something that wasn't even half of what it cost to get my heater fixed. And so I was like digging in my savings account. It was just like a whole like situation. But God came through and he had them come back and reevaluate my situation, and they gave me some more money and it all worked out, right? And so I was like, you know, like proud, like, you know, I didn't go around whining and complaining. I didn't go around, you know, stressing out about it. You know, in fact, even like someone I was talking to pretty frequently at that time had no idea that all this stuff were going on. And this person said to me, like, why didn't you tell me? Like, we talking and, you know, you're helping me with something. You didn't even mention that you're sitting there going through all this stuff, right? And so I'm like, Lord, I passed that test. Right, I passed that test. I did good, right? I believed you. You know, I didn't get all depressed and anxious and all that stuff. And so fast forward to this past Friday, July 1st, I come home and there's like water pouring from my kitchen ceiling all over my refrigerator. Um, all down that same wall in my basement behind my washer and dryer. Like I didn't even replace my washer and dryer right away because I was more so worried about getting my heater fixed because the weather had gotten cold. And so I was like going back and forth to the laundromat. And then I was like, oh, I don't want to get a washer and dryer. I want to get a backup battery for my sump pump, you know, in case the electricity goes out like it did during Hurricane Ida. You know, it'll be something to kick in to help get that water out. Like it was just like all of this stuff, you know, that I was like, let me just get some stuff done first before I invest in that washer and dryer again because I was so aggravated. I'm like, I don't ever want to have to go through this again. So I finally got all this stuff like together, and I finally got a washer and dryer like maybe 2.5 months ago. And hello, water like was flooding all over this new washer and dryer. And so I was aggravated. I'm like, Lord, I passed that test. Like I did not fail it, right? Because in my head, I'm like, in the spiritual, in the natural, like we only have to retake tests when we fail them, right? Like we don't have to retake tests if we pass them. So I'm like a little aggravated. Like, why am I having to face this again when I literally did a good job, right? Like, give me my gold star. Like, I passed the test. Why, Lord, why am I having to go through this again? And as I sat in my quiet time with God, you know, feeling aggravated and kind of just, I guess, meditating on, like, why am I having to go through this again, right? Like I'm a single, you know, homeowner, and so all this stuff happens, you know, like I'm trying to figure out like all this stuff, like what plumber do I call? What contractor do I call? You know, like all of this stuff. And I'm like, why do I have to deal with all of this again? Right. And God began to minister to me about Job. And it is so funny because I never used to like the book of Job. I mean, I would skip past that book so fast. I mean, I would turn those pages like, no, you know, I just feel like for Job, right? I just felt like, oh, it's just not fair. Like, why is you know, he having to go through this stuff, right? Because he was described as like a perfect and upright man. And I just began to think about how Job had to have some aggravated faith, right? Like, because it says, you know, it was a messenger who came and, told him like, oh, your oxen and your donkey were stolen and your servants were killed, right? And then it's like, oh, before that messenger could even finish telling Job about that, another messenger came and was like, oh, fire fell on your sheep and more of your servants were devoured along with them. Right. And then the Bible's like, and then before that messenger could even finish, another messenger came and told him about how the Chaldeans made a raid on his camels and killed even more servants, right? And then before that messenger could finish, another messenger came and told him about how all his children had been killed. And it was just like, can Job catch his breath? Like before he was able to even like fully wrap his mind around what the last person said, right? Before he was able to even comprehend and like gather his thoughts and stuff, like they were bringing more bad news. Like all of your livestock, has been taken away from you, right? Your children have been taken away from you, right? Like all of your possessions, like everything, like just back to back to back to back to back, right? And then like God began to show me like, okay, Job still held onto his faith, right? Like even though like all of this stuff was happening back to back to back, he still held onto his faith. And that's when the enemy came around for like a second round of tests. And he was like, okay. So he didn't lose his faith when you touched his possessions. He didn't lose his faith when you killed his children. But let me touch his health and let me see what he does, right? And so he Job's body from head to toe became covered in boils, right? You know how painful that must have been. And I just began to think, it's like, okay, so Job faced another round of tests, not because he fell first round of tests with his possessions and his children, right? But because the enemy said, Lord, let me press him a little bit harder and see what he does then. Like I know he remained faithful during the first round of tests. Like I know that he didn't curse you and die, right? I know that he didn't, just give up during those situations. But let me see. Let me just try something else. Let me just press a little bit more. And so that let me know that we don't only come up against situations that we fell, right? Like it's not only, oh, I fell in that area, but it could be that you're coming up against that similar situation again because you passed in that, right? And so the enemy is like, let me press on that area a little bit more, right? See, she might be okay because she still had X amount of dollars in her savings account after that first round of stuff. But let me see if I press on her a little bit more, right? When she got to put like $1,000 out for a plumber. Let me press on her a little bit more. She got to put another $1,000 out, for a deductible if her home insurance covers everything like they're supposed to, right? Let's see if she still has that same faith level as her bank account, right? Starts dwindling down, right? Let's see if she still has that same amount of faith when she's having to make more and more phone calls, try and figure out all this stuff, right? When her ceiling is like half open and her walls all cut out and stuff, and she's sitting here just bought a washer and dryer and now it's messed up again. Like, let's see if I press a little bit more, if she'll change her tune, right? And so I thought about that. And then what I also was reminded of is Joseph. And I thought about how Joseph's brothers, came to him and they were trying to apologize, in the book of Genesis. Joseph said, listen, I know y'all meant it for evil, but God was planning this thing to work out for my good, right? And I began to look at it that way as well. Like, listen, the enemy might be saying, Lord, let me do X, Y, and Z to her because his plan is for it to destroy me, right? His plan is for it to depress me. His plan is for it to make me lose my faith and to be walking around all irritated and angry, right? And sad and mad, right? But God is planning to work it out for my good, right? And God began to remind me about how, I'm always talking about I want that big faith, right? I'm always talking about I want radical faith and all of this stuff, right? And he just reminded me that you don't get big faith, right? You don't get radical faith just by, saying these cute words out of your mouth. Like that stuff gets birthed out of, right? There is spiritual growth that has to take place. So in order for, you to have this big faith and radical faith, like there are certain situations that you have to come up against to birth it out of you, right? You have to be looking at some really looking at some situations where things don't look promising, right? You got to be looking at some situations that look a little sketchy, right? That look a little, I don't know, but be able to believe God and to trust God and to walk around speaking his word and believing it, right? And then as you do that and God shows himself faithful, it increases that faith, right? And so it's like we can't just say things, right? We gotta live the things that we say. And that's the revelation that he really began to give me. Like you want big faith, you want radical faith, but you're gonna have to go through some things where that radical big faith is birthed out of you, right? But what I know is that even though the enemy means these things to break me, God is using it to grow. He's using it to mature me, right? He is birthing some big faith and radical faith, right? He is birthing some things out of me to pour in, right? Because he is a good father. He's a good, loving father. And he is going to work it out on our behalf, right? And so I can stand, in faith, knowing that God is faithful, right? Knowing that he's going to work it out for me, right? Like this is just a part of the process. And so if you are going through some aggravated faith, like me, I just want to encourage you, right? Because Job, he went through some back-to-back things, right? And the enemy, he planned it for bad, right? He planned it to destroy Job, right? He planned it to make Job lose his faith. But God ended up restoring Job. His riches were restored. He was given more children. So everything that the enemy meant for evil, God turned that thing around in Job's life. He turned it around for his good. And so if you are facing some things right now that is trying your faith, right? If you are standing and you're like, Lord, I trust you. I know you're gonna work this thing out, but I'm just a little irritated because I'm tired of actually going through things back to back. Like I passed that last test, and yet here I am going through something else. Be encouraged. Know that if you continue to stand, know that if you continue to trust God, that God will get the glory from that situation and that something incredible is going to be birthed out of it, right? Listen, I know that I was encouraged by this faith chat, okay? Just even talking about just the faithfulness of God and just the different things that he spoke to my spirit and different revelations, that he has given me about some different things. It's just encouraged me. And I love how God shows up and how he does that. Like if we spend time with him, like we can go to God and be like, Daddy, I'm a little bit annoyed right now. Daddy, I'm a little bit frustrated right now, right? Like we can have these conversations with God. Like we can let him know because he already knows anyway. He already know if you irritated. He already know if you aggravated, right? But we can go to him and be like, God, I don't understand why I'm having to face, something else when I did good on my last test. Like, I passed on that last test. Like, so I actually don't understand why I'm having to go through this again. Like, we can go to God and we can talk to him. And then if you sit still and listen, like, God will speak to your spirit. He will shed some light on some things. And so I'm just grateful that we have God that shows up and that speaks to us and that he encourages us. And he just lets us know, like, it is okay. Like, the enemy may mean these things for bad, but I got your back. Like, I'm going to turn that thing around for your good if you continue to stand and have. And so, listen, y'all. This thing encouraged me. I pray that it encouraged you all. So I hope you enjoyed this solo chat today. And until the next time, God bless and take care.